I'm trying to get harder and tougher mentally and physically every day of my life.
You're either the growth mindset or you're the fixed mindset.
If you're trying to be the best, you need to look at who the best is and see what they do.
Relentless pursuit of progress.
There's a difference between the best and the rest.
Welcome to the Brute Strength Podcast,
Champions are built in the mind first,
where we interview scientists, world champions, doctors, and experts in just about every area of health and fitness.
What do you care enough about? What are you fascinated enough about to go so deep and learn so much that you'll know more about it than anyone else?
And now, here's your host, Michael Cazayoux.
Welcome back. This is Michael Cazayoux, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. I've got an awesome episode for you today. I am joined by my good friend Dave Inglis. He is the founder of Strategic Solitude, his newest project that focuses on helping leaders in business and other industries get clarity on what matters to them in their personal and professional life and creating systems for how to get there. Dave is also a serial entrepreneur. He built and sold his first company called Concussion Toolbox and has been a part of a number of other projects. And he has taught hundreds of leaders the methods and mindsets of innovation and personal transformation at some crazy organizations like the Royal Canadian Air Force, Canon, General Motors, and a number of other massive companies. I know Dave through a leadership program that we're a part of, and we just immediately hit it off. He's one of the most genuine people I've ever met in my life. He asks incredible questions, and he's the type of person that I just know is committed to doing the deepest personal introspective work known to man. And he just embodies that. And so the idea for this show was to just be a little more experiential. So pretty much the entire episode is us going through, I think, 4 or 5 of his most powerful questions that he asks some of the leaders that do the experiences that he puts on. And he asks them to me and I answer them, and he explains what's going on in each question, why he asked them, and gives a little bit of context. And so feel free to just listen, for education purposes. But I really encourage you, if you feel inspired at the end of this, to create a space for yourself and ask these questions of yourself, because these are some, I think they can lead to some really big insights and actions in your life. So without further ado, please help me welcome my good friend, Dave Inglis. This episode is also brought to you by Jumbo CBD. If you're not already on the CBD train, then I'm sure you've at least heard of it before, because many people thought in the beginning that this was just a legal way to get high. And unfortunately for some of you, you can't get high on CBD. You can try, but you can't get high on it. On the other hand, it can help you sleep better. It can reduce stress and anxiety. It can be huge for pain relief and reducing inflammation. Personally, I've had knee pain for about 5 years now, and I haven't been able to figure out a way to get rid of it. I haven't figured out the root cause. I've worked with PTs and chiropractors, and I just haven't been able to eradicate it. So I have used some pain relieving techniques, and this is one of them. I've used Jumbo's extra strength 200 milligram balm, and it absolutely does not completely take the pain away, but it makes it manageable. It allows me to get into a deeper squat. It allows me to walk around and just go about my daily activities without feeling much pain at all. And whether that's placebo or not, I really don't care, because I just don't feel like I'm in as much pain. I've also used their sprays, and there's a really subtle relaxing effect to the sprays. So that's pretty great. It's helpful for sleep and reduces a little bit of like a feeling of tension in my chest, which I often call anxiety. It's great for athletes and recovery. And some specifics and what sets Jumbo apart is that they have 100% natural ingredients, full spectrum CBD sourced from Colorado and Oregon. They have CO2 extracted oils that are, I think, safer. They have therapeutic grade essential oils in a lot of their products, third-party lab tested, so it's legit. And they're one of the first CBD companies to post their lab results publicly. I also know the owners of this company very well. They're very close friends of mine, and I trust them deeply. Again, my favorite product of theirs is the 200 milligram extra strength balm. I've also used the sprays, but they also have drops and butters or ghee. I think ghee is like a butter type thing. So there's all sorts of different products. And they're offering you 15% off of anything in their store. And you can get access to that by going to jumbocbd.com and use the code BRUTE in all caps. That's BRUTE in all caps. A couple more things. So a huge plus of their sprays and drops is that they use MCT oil. So since CBD is a fat soluble molecule, it binds with this oil and allows for much more rapid and effective absorption of the actual CBD. It also has essential oils that add flavor, and they bring their own proven health benefits as well. With the Muscle Bomb, since they use ghee as the base, again, ghee is like a butter type thing, the CBD is binding with the ghee fat, and it's able to be carried all the way to the bones. Ghee itself has amazing topical healing properties, and when CBD is added, the results can be pretty profound. So again, you can get access to this discount, 15% off of all of their products by going to jumbocbd.com and enter the code BRUTE, all caps, at checkout. Go get them. Dave, welcome to the show, man.
Mike, man, thanks so much for having me. Excited to spend a little bit of time with you today.
Yeah, I'm fired up, dude. Listeners, we're going to do a little bit of a different show today. It's going to be a little bit more experiential. Let me set this up a little bit. So I pulled this quote from Einstein, who said that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend the first 55 minutes determining what the proper question to ask was. You're one of the best question askers I've ever met, and I thought today we would go through some of what you think are your most powerful questions that you've done with, leaders of companies, high performers in different industries that have led to some of the biggest insights or aha moments. My intention with this is hopefully to inspire some people to take some solitude, do some deep introspective work, and ask these questions of themselves. And so you and I will just go back and forth and we'll answer the questions that you've prepared so that people get a real feeling for what your intent is. And we'll kind of just take it from there.
Love it. Love it. Let's jump right in.
You have the questions prepared. Do you want to give us any context before we get going on these questions?
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe a little bit of context, if it's helpful, and I'll keep it short, and you can ask me some questions, Mike, just to maybe elaborate where you think there's extra color worth sharing. But for me, I think ever since I was a kid, I've always had this natural inclination to want to be really self-aware, to ask questions. Luckily, I grew up in a household where my experience with my mom or with some of my colleagues or greatest mentors, that's a lot of where our time, energy was put around, was just, even as a kid, jumping into bed and saying, well, how was your day? And who did you make smile? And, how could you have been a better person? And how could you have expressed more love? It was always just this part of my experience as a kid, and that started to manifest a lot more as I got older, into my adolescence, and then now into my profession. And it's interesting, you often end up doing work that scratches your own itch, right? Mm-hmm. Or solves your own problem. And I think, like many of us, I took a couple weird left turns throughout my adolescence, and really started to feel lost. There was a point in time, Mike, where for myself, I realized that, as our friend Philip McKernan has said so much better than we could, I was rich on paper and poor in life. I was just graduating university at the time. I had a new business that I had started that was going really well. But at that very same time, I felt absolutely exhausted. I felt like I wanted to cry any single moment that I was alone, and something wasn't right. I was not experiencing peace in pursuit of the achievements that I had in front of me. And just started to realize that the pain that I was experiencing in pursuit of a lot of that was greatly outweighing and so much more prominent than the emotions of success and achievement and joy that I was really starting to expect. And so as a bit of context around where these questions kind of came from for me, I remember this was back in 2012. I decided to bugger off, for which was really my first real solid holiday in probably 6 or 7 years. We just finished up some research around concussions at school when I was just graduating university, and our business had finally had a bit of a window here where I could take some space. And I remember finding myself thinking this was going to be a terrific vacation, went to BC, did some snowboarding, had a ton of fun with friends, and then found myself in Hawaii for a week of bliss by myself for some solitude. And it was terrible. I found myself crying over Coronas at the beach, locked up in my hotel room.
Corona beers, not the
Corona
virus.
Beers. Yes, not COVID, depending on when this airs. But I just found myself in arguably the most beautiful place in the world, feeling absolutely empty. And that's when I started to come back to a lot of the questions that were so formative in my experience growing up, and realizing that there's been so much time between me and that younger Dave. And so there was this curiosity of trying to figure out, why is it so painful for me to be in pursuit of the things that I think I really want? And are those really the things that I want? And so after coming back from that time away, I started to realize that solitude that I sought out, at that point in time, I came back and made a decision not to continue with the business that we were running. I realized that deep down, there was no business model Dave fit there. We had a really cool product market fit. We were onto something, but at the end of the day, I wasn't really excited about it. I realized that, maybe there was some responsibility on my end too, in the fact that I hadn't talked to my dad in 5 or 6 years. And maybe that some of that pain, although I kind of pushed him out of my life, was a result of why I wasn't able to actually be at peace in what I was doing. And started to ask myself, what would it look like for me to rather wait until I feel like I want to, give everything up, to be able to create more space for these types of questions more regularly. And that really evolved into a personal practice, Mike, that I know I've shared with you in the past, that I've been now calling strategic solitude, and really starting to embed this into my practice and now the practice of leaders and teams that I work with. I mean, after doing that, I've now found myself being very fortunate to be guiding executive teams and companies through the really challenging process of corporate innovation and continuing to hold space for them to figure out what's next for their business. And as I was in those types of conversations and challenging teams to be able to really ask tough questions about their work, I really started to recognize this constant pattern here, Mike, where everybody's pushing themselves at threshold. And we're always, it's amazing how much we respect and create space to ask questions about this in our businesses, or in the not-for-profits that we're doing, or in the projects that we're inspired, or the art that we're inspired to go and create. But how often do we actually provide that same framework and discipline and space for the things that really matter most to us? And so that's where it was really the kind of connection and the point, or the bridge, if you will, from a lot of my work in corporate innovation now into personal innovation, I would call it, for lack of better words, right? And really starting to apply these proven practices of solitude and strategic thinking, but to this idea of us being the CEOs of our own lives. Right. And I truly believe that. And one of the things I'm excited to talk to you today and share with your listeners is this idea of building eclectic wealth, which is really something that's at the core of this idea of strategic solitude. So rather than pausing to be able to evaluate if we're achieving or if we're building things and starting to realize the material success that we sought out to go and do, are we doing that in a way where we're starting to steal or borrow from other areas of our lives and challenging ourselves to say, are there non-traditional currencies in the world worth building abundance around? And today I want to talk to your listeners about what their currencies are. If you were to think about, having a triple bottom line for your life, we talk about this in business a lot with B corporations and profit and people and planet. But I don't think a lot of people have actually pushed themselves to be able to explore what are those currencies of the triple bottom line just for myself, for Dave Inglis, or for Mike. And are the investments that I'm making with my time, energy, and money actually aligned to that? And what I've started to realize through continuing to do the strategic solitude practice, Mike, for myself and sharing it with leadership teams and others now, is that really when we can focus on alignment in that portfolio and also bringing awareness to how rich we really are, it's amazing how much we can really start to begin experiencing peace in pursuit of the things that we want to go and do, rather than really leaving that as something that we believe we'll realize at the end. So that's a bit of context for you. Happy to elaborate more on that any which way, but excited to dive in some of the questions today and hold space for your listeners to start to ask themselves what this might look like and invite them to consider a practice like strategic solitude for themselves.
Why questions? Why the importance on questions, or the emphasis on questions?
It's a good question, pardon the pun, but the emphasis on questions. So, I mean, where this comes up for me and where I've seen really good, seen a lot more results from asking questions, is that when I look for answers instead of focusing on questions, I've found that in hindsight, there's been opportunities that are right in front of me that I didn't even see because I was looking for an answer. And by asking a question, I think it allows us to be able to explore things that seem disconnected, and allow us to have a little bit more space. And so obviously in asking a question, implicitly you're looking for an answer. But I think really at the heart of this work, Mike, it's asking questions and observing, not actually looking for a rather literal answer, but observing to see what comes up in your awareness and allowing just the question itself to guide you to start to see things a little bit differently. And for me, that question approach really just helps prime ourselves to be curious. And so many of us, we all struggle, and we've all been told that we have beliefs that maybe don't serve us from earlier in our life or different lives, depending on what you believe. And I just think focusing on questions for groups really allows us to be open, be curious, but also in the context of guiding others through this, if you're a team leader or a coach, when we ask questions, we're not prescribing something to somebody else. At the end of the day, they own that. And that level of ownership is core, I think, to anybody feeling empowered to actually move forward with the insights they get in whatever context you're asking questions.
Yeah. I think there's a distinction between asking someone else a question and receiving their answer versus asking yourself a question and receiving your own answer and owning your own answer. In our society, for so many different reasons, where it's shaped to put leaders on pedestals and to outsource answers in life or direction in life. One thing that I'm embodying, believing so much more every day is the concept of like the guru within, the divine within, the teacher within. If I can, and I believe this about every human being, if we can really ask ourselves the right questions and tune in, use our own intuition, the wisest answers will come out of our intuition, out of our minds. But constantly looking to others to give us that direction can cause a lot of problems.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And I think the biggest problem there is it creates drag. Like at the end of the day, when we outsource those types of decisions, and this is why I love this idea of, you call it the guru within. I might describe it as, declaring to be the CEO of your own life. Mm-hmm. When we take absolute personal responsibility, there's no reason for drag, right? When we outsource it to others, this is something I saw so many times in my work around corporate innovation. I can't tell you how many leaders, and it's surprising how senior these leaders would be, saying, well, I can't go and enroll in that professional development course. My company isn't providing the money. Or they haven't told me what course I need to go and do to go and get my next promotion. So when we push that out onto somebody else and we give away, with all due respect, the respect for ourselves, but more importantly, the responsibility of making those types of choices, inevitably it's going to drag our progress going forward and the progress that we see within ourselves. So I think taking the responsibility and choosing to want to listen and trusting that is a really important skill, admittedly. And if you look at things that are taking place right now with COVID and that, we talk a lot about IQ and EQ. An emerging field right now is AQ, your adaptability quotient, right? And the ability to listen to your own intuition and ask those questions consistently to be able to adapt to the environment that's there is a skill that I think we have to possess ourselves. Mm-hmm. We cannot outsource that to anybody else. And if we do, we're quite vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. So let's get into this. So we're going to talk about the triple bottom line, and we're going to go through these questions and we'll give our own answers. And then we can give people some guidelines or tips to get the most out of these questions.
Cool. Sounds great.
Take us away.
So the triple bottom line, Mike, are you familiar with a B corporation? Can we share that?
Yeah, briefly, but definitely give us a refresher.
Yeah, so a B corporation, for those who might not be familiar with that, it's an organization that was created a number of years ago now, but it's a not-for-profit that really is a governing body that's now around the world that is supporting organizations in adhering to a certain set of principles or beliefs to make sure that as they are moving their mission forward, they are not just pursuing financial success, that they are explicitly measuring and being accountable to being an organization that is not only building financial success, but they are making an impact on people and on the planet as well. And so this idea of triple bottom line is really interesting when you think about a B corporation. Somebody like Justin, who we had the chance to meet down in Colorado, who has Justin's Peanut Butter, right? They're an example, I believe, as a B corporation who are truly committed to ethical work, making sure that they're giving back to the planet and to people. And I use B corporation as an example because I think it's one of the only ones that is widely understood or widely seen of this idea of having a triple bottom line and inviting organizations to consider something beyond finances. And again, this isn't to replace finances or to suggest that financial wealth is not important, but a lot of organizations will pursue financial success at the detriment of the planet or at the detriment of their people. Mm-hmm. And so when we make decisions around those types of things, it's really fascinating because if we only measure our success based on financial returns, it's so easy for us to be able to look at different options and select the one that indexes us towards that outcome. Mm-hmm. But if we have a triple bottom line, it's forcing leaders and organizations to have a different frame of reference for making their decisions, where there might be something that does not necessarily have the higher return that you're looking for, but it actually creates an abundance of engagement from your people or really stimulates well-being of your staff. And so I think it really is a good example, Mike, like I was saying, of just a company who has not only done that for themselves, but has now empowered others to be able to do that. But I think we can go beyond that, admittedly. And I think the idea of a triple bottom line in principle is really interesting. But for me, when I think about it myself, the things that I just mentioned that companies often do, I often do that myself. I will make decisions to go and pursue growing my business or expanding our real estate portfolio, what have you, that are often at the detriment of my sense of connection with community, right? Or often at the detriment of my health and well-being, where I'll go and put in 50 or 60 hours a week, into work, realizing that I haven't sweat for more than 2, right? And so it's been a really interesting realization for myself. And I think for a lot of people, when you start to explore these different currencies, one of the big and really hard aha moments, Mike, is, sometimes we borrow from different areas of our life. But I had one of my clients a couple of weeks back in December come up to me after we were talking about this and said, you know what? Borrowing from different areas of your life means that there has to be an explicit agreement. So it means that if I'm going to go and pursue financial success or grow my business for this quarter, I may need to have a little extra energy and time to go and do it. So if I'm going to borrow from my health and wellness, that means that there's a point in time where I'm going to go and pay that back. He goes, I've been stealing. I haven't been borrowing. There's been no agreement. I've just been stealing. And, one of the things that I would love to ask your listeners is, is where are you stealing right now? What parts of your life are you stealing from where you don't have any agreement or thoughtful, intentional way of paying that back, if that's an area that matters to you? So one of the first questions that I thought we could ask your listeners, Mike, is to ask themselves, and I'd love maybe for you to answer this too, to put you on the spot and say, well, what would your triple bottom line be? Mm-hmm. If you were to think about Mike and not your organization, not your company, but just you as a leader and soon to be a dad. What is your triple bottom line? With acknowledgement that can change over time. So I don't want you to answer this question as if you're fixed to this and for the remainder of your time on the planet, these are the ways that you're going to measure your success and make choices. But what do you think those would be? Right now, at least.
what's most energizing, exciting to me right now is number one is presence and awareness. So my ability to just focus on what I am doing in the present moment, that is my current like guiding light. That's the most important thing in my life. Number two is love and relationships with my wife, with community, with family. And then finally is growth and learning.
Great. Those are all awesome. And again, when we think about this, and I introduced the idea of eclectic wealth or eclectic currencies of wealth, they're non-traditional. So right away you could say, well, how the hell do you measure growth and learning? Or how the heck do I measure my awareness or my sense of love and relationship, right? And I think, it's a distraction from the bigger point, those types of questions. The important thing here is to realize that these are things that matter to you, and you want to see that you're continuously growing wealth. And ideally, challenge me if you think differently, but I love the idea of intergenerational wealth, not just building wealth and awareness and love and relationships and growth and learning for you, but so that you can pass it on to others, right? That to me is a type of legacy that I want to leave, not just a massive trust fund.
Amen. Yeah, that's great.
So a couple for me that really resonate, because I know you had asked me to also reflect on some of these questions. And I agree with yours around growth and learning. That's a big one for me. I don't want to skip by what might be the obvious one, financial success and financial wealth. That's absolutely one for me. It's a resource and a tool that allows me to go and do a lot. So I'm certainly mindful of that. But one that I've found to be really resonating with me right now, and it's somewhat uncommon, is this idea of adventure and awe. And that's been a currency, and we'll talk about this in a moment, around how do you make small tweaks to the investments that we're making with our time and energy to really build the sense of richness in these other currencies. But adventure and awe is something that has had a massive impact on how I've been leaning into every single moment of my day, and constantly looking for those moments where it's so easy to be able to skip by it. Quick example for you. This morning, big investment that I make every single morning. We recently got a puppy, Mike. So Mango and I, we jump on the trail, and we could have just gone for a walk around the neighborhood. But as I was thinking about this morning, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm going to go for a walk with Mango. We need to go and do that. I wish the kids would go and do this with me too. Now I digress. But as I'm out there thinking, okay, how could I really take this investment of time that I'm putting in for the next 45 minutes and not only get a good return on just training my dog, but how can I use this time and energy and my investment here to have a sense of adventure and awe, to be able to do it where my health and wellness is being stimulated, and to be able to do it in a way where another currency that really matters for me, community and connection with my faith. Okay, great. So rather than just going on the block, I'm going to go and drive 5 minutes to a beautiful pasture where I can watch the sunrise. And I'm just going to enjoy 5 or 10 minutes of that hour-long walk or that hour-long, trail run, and really experience and savor that moment. My morning is entirely different, right? And I got to see something in that moment that otherwise, if I didn't measure that as a part of my wealth, I would have just raced by. So that's one for me, adventure and awe, that I think with that lens again of knowing what these currencies are for us, we can always spot opportunities to be able to experience that or more intentionally cultivate that in any moment that we're in or any position that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. What's next?
So from there, once we identify what our currencies are, I think a really interesting approach to this idea of strategic solitude is kind of treating this like a bit of a portfolio review. So if we think about these different currencies, and we'll just stick to the ones that you've listed for yours, Mike. So awareness, love and relationship, growth and learning. Like I mentioned, it's tough to be able to measure each of these, but I wonder if you were to think about your net worth through this lens of both your financial success, but also these other currencies, how would you describe anecdotally the amount of wealth that you have in each of these currencies? And maybe I'll give you a bit of a framework to think about this. So something really simple, if you're thinking about this yourself, and if you're listening, we have a worksheet that just quite simply for each of the currencies that you list has 5 stars on it. 1 star means that you're experiencing poverty in that space right now. It means that you've probably, if you're like me years ago, I gave away my health and my wellness in pursuit of what I thought was going to be, a thriving business at that point in time. And so I was a 1 star that I really didn't have any health and wellness to be able to go and stand on. I didn't have the energy or the vitality to be able to really help me be at my best. 3 stars. 3 stars is where you feel like you have a really good high savings rate. So if I think about yours right now, for an example, growth and learning. If you're 3-star out of 5 in growth and learning, you're really confident that you're spending your time and energy on the right things. And you feel like you're learning things that are serving you. And over time, you're going to be accumulating wealth in your growth and learning. So it's not necessarily about finding out what that right investment is. It's just about allowing time to actually compound and the results to be able to start to accumulate and amass over time. And then 5 stars, intergenerational wealth. You feel like you're at a spot now where you have enough wealth in that currency that it's almost impossible for the generations after you in your family or your direct community to not benefit from the wealth that you have.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And to me, that all of a sudden, it helps us go beyond ourselves. And for many of us, this will really be why we're doing everything that we're doing. But sometimes we forget what that driver is. And so if I was to ask you, with that really simple framework of 5 stars, think about your awareness, your love in your relationships, your commitment to growth and learning. How would you describe the current state of wealth that you have in each of those areas? And I'll let you describe them whatever you'd like. Feel free to use that frame of reference that I shared.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a 3 on presence and awareness because I have so many different, I'm up to a 3 because I have so many habits and rituals around taking a pause in my day, from meditation to one big investment I'm making right now is pausing 5 times a day and doing this little breath work routine with some like gratitude and stuff mixed in it. That's a big investment there. And I take a lot of space to invest in that area, but I'm not at a 4 yet because like the vast majority of my day, I'm still caught up in my head. And in a lot of conversations that I'm in, there's this like, I'm not fully present, and I'm at least I'm aware of that fact. So I think that's the next step, is like more moments throughout the day where I'm just fully present.
And I would say, in my experience, really trying to go beyond that high savings rate, Mike, and really get into a spot where you're building intergenerational wealth. And again, it's that state of wealth where others around you, your direct family, obviously, but others in your community, the family that you choose, cannot help but benefit from you. And so when you talk about awareness and presence, what are some examples of ways that you've been taking the practices and habits that you've been building in your life and starting to share and teach others how to build and cultivate more awareness and presence? Have you been doing that right now? Or is that something that you see as an opportunity for yourself?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do quite a bit of this. And I think probably the most powerful way is in the way that I show up in some conversations. So I can use the example of like an argument or fight with a D. I think what is typical for people is when, if a D would complain about something to me or I don't know, berate me or whatever, the typical response is to react, to get defensive, and to further contribute to this like elevated or heightened emotional, situation. And what I've been practicing for a long time, and I think I see myself getting better at this, is kind of remaining calm, realizing that what she's saying about me doesn't have to make me feel a certain way. And, when she complains about something that I've forgotten for the 5th time, and I can start to see this defensiveness go on in my mind. I notice tension arise in my chest or in my neck, rather than that happening so fast that I immediately react and start like defending and like, I don't know, complaining about something that she does, or telling her why it's her fault that I forgot, or whatever the thing may be. And so by doing that, by being non-reactive and regulating myself, I've seen her learn how to do that so much more by just watching me do that in our conversations.
Great example, Mike. And that's where I would challenge you to say, you may actually have 4 stars.
Cool. That's what I'm talking about.
Because if you think about that, and this is, I think, one of the big insights that I often see in groups that we do this work with when we create strategic solitude experiences, Mike, is a lot of times we don't realize how rich we really are. We take it for granted. And I think back to, Dave, who was 16 years old, maybe had $1,500 in his savings account. And, I was saving month by month, but I just wanted to be able to have like 100 grand in my bank account, or
at 15,
150.
at 16.
Well, at that point in time, like you have big dreams, right?
Yeah.
But my point is we have the ability to be able to see what we want and what maybe that balance might look like.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something really beautiful about investing, compound interest, consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think part of this process of evaluating what type of wealth we really have in these different areas, what's coming up for me and listening to you, Mike, is it possible that you're actually doing all the right things and making all the right investments you need to do in awareness and presence? And one of the best things that you can do is continue to trust that and let time work on your or in your favor, right? The ability for you to be able to have that pause and to be able to not react, to be able to respond, didn't happen on day one. Mm-hmm. It happened after you practicing this over time. So what would double the amount of time that you've invested in this yield in the future? And do you actually need to change the investment that you're in, or do you just need to allow the principle of compound investing to continue to work in your favor?
Are you telling me to be patient, Dave?
I'm telling you to be patient. That's right. And to stop pissing off a D.
Yeah. No,
right
that's
on.
great.
So
That's great, dude.
How about love and relationships and growth and learning? How would you describe each of those?
I think I'm a 4 in both. Love and relationships because I spend very quality time with the people that matter most to me. And even though I might not spend a lot of time with a lot of people that still matter to me, when I'm in conversation with people, I get really curious, and I don't know. I just feel like I'm leaning in, like I'm leaning into that relationship fully. Mm-hmm. I also just started, I don't think I've shared this with you. I just started a monthly family meeting with my family that I grew up with, because I've been craving like all of us being around each other at the same time. And that's been like huge growth for me to lead in that way. That's been amazing. Mm-hmm. And I have different rituals that are just so fulfilling. I have a weekly men's group. I have a weekly date night with a D. And so I just feel like I have this system for having really deep connection with the people that matter most to me. Beautiful.
And it sounds like you're really clear on what those investments are. Mm-hmm. And I use that language really specifically, Mike, because I think one of the greatest opportunity here with this type of self-awareness work and personal development that comes from taking this type of space and respecting it is for the group who's otherwise very cerebral, very focused on financial success, where they already have that craft there. Mm-hmm. If you can complement that with the polarity of self-awareness, attunement, emotional regulation, and a really clear intention of building this type of wealth, I think those are some of the most important people to work with because of the impact that they can have and be able to create that for others, right? Mm-hmm. And so this idea of investment, is important that we use language that resonates, right? The idea of compound interest. And now this kind of goes into my next question for you, which is think about the next 90 days. Mm-hmm. And I'm really specific about this when I say 90 days or 12 weeks. Whenever we install the ritual of strategic solitude, it's not going away when you need to, or when shit's hitting the fan, or when you're just on the brink of divorce, or your business is about to fail. Like, don't wait until that. A big principle around strategic solitude is prehab. Front load the practices that will make a huge difference downstream. Don't wait for there to be an issue, right, to be able to go and work on that. And so when we do this, I've often found it's really powerful to look at it through the lens of 12 weeks at a time, 3 weeks at a time. Our world changes so much. You and I are both expecting a little one in the coming year. The things that matter to us right now and the investments that we're making right now, fundamentally different come August and September, right? And so I think having the space to regularly say, okay, what's my investments for the next 12 weeks? Just for the next 12 weeks, not, over the next 5 years and having to commit to that, just like the currencies, giving ourselves permission to be able to change these. But if you think about the next 3 months, what are the top 3 to 5 investments that you're making with your time, energy, and money? Mm-hmm. And it's the investments that you are planning to make over the next 3 months? And if it's easier for you, maybe you can reflect back and say, what have been the 3 to 5 investments that you've been making over the last 90 days when we're sitting here today on our call?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a few that come up. Number one is this I'm calling them breath breaks. The other day I was thinking about like spirituality, presence, awareness. Those are at least I want them to be my biggest value and the most important thing. But if you look at my calendar, that's not true. So I asked myself, how can I make that more true? How can I live that value? And the Muslim tradition of like praying 5 times daily just popped into my head for some reason. Cool. And I looked into it a little bit, and I love that they have it at the same exact time of day every single day, because it's just like everything else has to fit around the most important thing, which to them is their faith in Allah, right? I'm not a religious person. I have a much different reason for wanting to insert these. So I have 5 times a day in my calendar at the same times every single day. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a big investment. Another one is I am in the process of creating a co-housing community, an intentional community. And so I'm going to be spending a lot of hours talking to different experts like developers and architects and thinking about this and talking to the community that I'm building this with. That's a really big one. And then lastly, Adi and I, this is on the learning, Adi and I are going to do like some joint coaching, some like higher level like life and health coaching together. And that's going to be a beautiful experiment. And I know we're going to learn a ton.
I love it. Very cool. And, within each of these, you can start to now with the awareness around the currencies that we talked about. So awareness and presence, love and relationships, growth and learning for yourself, how each of these investments are building wealth in each of those areas, right? And so even if we just kind of put those aside for a moment and say, okay, your breath breaks, how is that going to impact your financial success?
Indirectly, probably as well, probably pretty well.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I would agree. Co-housing community, is there any upside in there for you? Are you spending time and energy in doing that because there's an upside for yourself in there? Is there any pursuit around that or reason to?
I mean, the end goal of living in an intentional community is one of the most exciting things in my entire life. So it feels like a huge adventure to me along the way, like the path of getting there. And then getting there, at least in my head, the outcome is like feeling so deeply connected to a community and feeling like I belong somewhere. And along the way, I also expect to learn a lot about things like architecture and development and all of that kind of stuff. That's interesting to me anyway, like a lot of real estate type stuff and land development.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then same thing with coaching with Adi. Is there anything that could, from that experience, impact your financial success at all?
Oh, specifically financial success. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, if it goes really well and people love it, then that will allow us to generate more income.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because I only asked that. It might have seemed like a bit of an odd question, Mike, because you answering that question, it's very clear to me as you share your answers that you've done a lot of work to get to a spot to be able to discern what really matters for you. Mm-hmm. So many of us are still operating under that preconceived notion or conditioning that all the investments that you listed here, they're actually all directly mapped up against the currencies that you've listed for your triple bottom line. Mm-hmm. You're not making investments or prioritizing the biggest parts of your day just for financial success. You're very intentional around that. But that makes sense, being somebody who has 3 and 4 stars in each of those areas. Mm-hmm. You're making investments that are directly aligned to that. And there's a question that we'll talk about in a moment to be able to even deepen that and try and figure out how we can go up to building intergenerational wealth in that area, or in those areas rather. But so many of us are not at a spot, Mike, where we have a 3 or a 4 star there. Most of us, if we really, really, really sit, and this is why I encourage strategic solitude, where we go away by ourselves, because the truth does come up. We've all heard it. And we start to then realize maybe we aren't as, aligned and rich in those areas that we would really like to be. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a part of our behavior that is not necessarily building abundance in those areas, or maybe we actually don't even give a shit about the things that we've been working on, right? And we're doing it for the wrong reasons. So,
Right.
I mean, kudos to you for having really clear, thoughtful investments that you're making. One of the observations that I often have, and a question that I would have for your listeners, is really simple. Where is your video not matching your audio?
Yeah.
Because it's real easy to list off the investments that we want to go and make. But the actual follow through and integrity around that is really what matters. And I think at the end of the day, outcomes are outcomes. What I would really, where I find peace and pursuit of building wealth, Mike, is being a truth walker, being somebody who's walking in my truth and a living demonstration of the things that I've committed to. My measure of success is not that first line in my triple bottom line, my financial success. It's, am I actually adhering to and following through on the investments that I have deemed the most important to be able to make sure I'm building wealth in all these areas, right? So where is that audio not matching the video? I think is an important spot when we take inventory like this of the investments that we're making. If you think about over the last 3 months, what's an investment that you have been making that's no longer serving you?
What pops into my head first is something about either the hours that I'm working or the way that I'm working. And as you were talking about, like, how does your video not
match the audio?
The audio. That was the biggest thing. Like, if you look at my calendar, it would appear that, I don't know if it's financial success or career fulfillment or what that is, but that would be the highest priority given how much time I'm spending in my career. And for the most part, I love that. And I've been noticing, I don't have enough time to spend on some of those other things. And I'm feeling like a little burnt out at different points. So I think it's the amount of hours that I'm working.
Very cool. And that's where, if I were you in a spot of strategic solitude, and this is why I love having these pre-scheduled, like the idea you mentioned here around having a monthly family meeting, right? I love that. It's not too dissimilar from the idea of pre-scheduling the meetings with your family, or more importantly, the meeting with yourself, because it allows you to say, you know what, in 90 days from now, I have another strategic solitude where I've given myself permission to reevaluate my portfolio and to rebalance or to reinvest differently. I'm going to try for the next 90 days, not working these hours. And I'm going to go and see the impact of that change has on my investment portfolio. Am I feeling like I'm building more wealth in other areas? And is it truly at the detriment of my career success or my achievement there? Or is that just a belief that I have?
Yeah.
And so giving yourself that permission to be able to rebalance that portfolio and to look at the impact of that change across all those currencies helps us really figure out, hey, I might be making a little bit less money, or projects might be a little bit slower, but holy shit, is my love and my relationship right now with my family ever deeper than it has ever been before?
Right.
Totally worth it.
And if you're only indexing one bucket, then anytime that bucket's not killing it, then you feel like your world falling apart.
Absolutely. Look at it right now with COVID. How many people are losing their minds because, and myself included here, somebody who's achievement oriented, I can't go out there and do the craft that I do to be able to go make an impact. So by measuring myself solely on that, I feel like I'm just a lazy bum sitting at home. But if I really look at my investment portfolio of adventure and awe, health set, community and connection, holy shit, I don't think I've ever been so wealthy in these areas right now, right? And that is the idea here of becoming an eclectic millionaire. Eclectic, everybody's different. Everybody's got different currencies. But by damn, don't find yourself in a position where you're financially successful and you are bankrupt with 1 star and experiencing poverty in every other area. That is not, in my opinion, what real wealth looks like. And I think we have an opportunity to challenge ourselves to be able to find ways to thoughtfully make some small course corrections. Again, we're playing in the margins here, Mike. People who are playing at threshold, these aren't massive changes that we're asking. These are small, marginal changes that allow us to be able to realize more wealth in areas that are not always so obvious.
I was just going to say, one thing I love about the way that you're setting this up is the 90-day experiment, or just a set time period of doing some sort of experiment, because one of the things that I think keeps people from making meaningful change in their life is just fear of, I think this is the direction I should be going, but what if it makes it worse, right? If you set up an experiment with a start and end date and you intend to reflect upon the results at the end of it, then it removes almost all, if not all, of the fear of starting the experiment in the first place. And then it also allows you to further cement any learnings by having a reflection process at the end.
Absolutely. And it allows you to make decisions about what to do next based on your context, right? Mm-hmm. Rather than based on what you feel like you should be doing or wherever that comes from. It gives you a chance to actually pause and make decisions that are not so emotionally driven, mm-hmm. right? So certainly, I think when it comes to this idea of eclectic wealth, Mike, that's the biggest thing that I could encourage people to do is build the practice of regularly evaluating your wealth, because it will remind you of how rich you really are, right? And it will allow you to figure out the investments that are no longer serving you and give yourself an opportunity to reconnect with the things that really are generating great returns in your life, so you can double down just like you would in the market, right? Final question here that I'd love to ask you, Mike, is this idea of how do you create a multiplier effect? So I'm going to give you a quick example, and then I'd love for you to maybe reflect very specifically around the co-housing community that you talked about that you're so excited to go and build, okay? So last year I decided to go and do an Ironman, and prior to doing this, I didn't even know how to swim. I could float in a pool with a beer and an inner tube, but getting me to go swim across a lake or a pool for that matter, 25-meter pool, fat chance. But as I was leaning into that, the primary driver for me and why I wanted to make that commitment to doing it was solely for my health. I was saying, you know what? I'm somebody who does so well with a really clear goal in mind, a race date. There's nothing that motivates me better than having a day that I have to go and perform. I love being in environments where it's really clear on the process that I have to go through to be able to build my capacity and my strength to be able to go and do that. That's really neat. And so I embarked on that journey. And, when you're 6 months into a deep training block for Ironman, if your health and wellness is your primary motivator, let me tell you, it's pretty damn hard to get your ass on that bike for the, 18th hour that week. Damn. So as I was thinking about that, the idea of the multiplier effect. So investing in the Ironman, the primary return that I was looking for out of that was my health and wellness, where I really started to see some terrific engagement from myself and getting a lot more joy and admittedly feeling like I'd actually experienced the experience of getting ready for Ironman and really not being a miserable prick in pursuit of that because of all the work that goes into it, was saying, well, how might I take this investment I'm making for my health and wellness and use this investment as a vehicle for generating returns in my community, in my connection, in my faith, in my adventure and awe? And just by asking that question, a really, really clear investment for me. Okay, I know why I'm doing this. I know what the primary driver is. But what if I thought through the lens, okay, let's go beyond that. How can I get a multiplier effect out of this? How can I use the Ironman as a vehicle for experiencing more adventure and awe? Okay, well, I'm not just going to go and sign up to go to Tremblant up in Quebec, which is not too far away from us. I've been there before. I'm going to go to Whistler, Canada. I'm going to go out into one of the most, remarkable race courses in the world to be able to go and do this. And when I do my bike rides every single week, I'm not just putting in my calendar, okay, I need to go and do a 2.5-hour set just below my FTP. I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to go and do that. But for this workout on Thursday, where am I going to go and do it so I can experience adventure and awe? Okay, I'm going to get my ass up early so I can go and see the sunrise. I'm going to go and do it where I know there's a beautiful series of new homes that are being built. I really want to go and see them. Or, hey, I've never been to the other side of London, Ontario. So why don't I go and just explore that and have a little bit of an adventure? Okay, cool. Now that I know what my adventure is, who can I invite? Rather than just me getting on this bike by myself, how can I use this time on the bike to have more of a connection with people? Okay, well, you know what? Maybe they're not training for Ironman, but why don't I call one of my good friends, Wes, that lives in London, and see if he can come out for even a portion of the bike ride? It doesn't have to be the entire thing, right? Okay, great. Well, what about learning? Well, while I'm riding, I can make sure that I'm not just listening to music. Why don't I throw in an audiobook, right? And all of a sudden, I have this 2.5-hour ride where when I first was leading into Ironman, I was just focused on what's my FTP output got to be?
Yeah.
What are the intervals I got to go and run? And how am I going to go and send my data back to my coach? And now I'm saying, okay, well, with this lens of eclectic wealth, all of a sudden now I'm doing it with somebody who I haven't seen in years, and I have this sense of connection. We had a chance to go and explore something as a result of that. And I also was able to learn as I was on my bike at the same time. Do you see how rich that is, right? And so it's seemingly insignificant. And that's why I'm talking about we're playing in the margins here, Mike. Like, this is not big changes. It's not deciding not to do Ironman or changing what I'm doing or my routine. It's looking for ways to really intentionally enrich the investment to get a multiplier effect in other currencies that I've identified that matter to me. Does that resonate?
Absolutely, man. Yeah, what comes to mind immediately for me is my decision to do more rock climbing. Rock climbing, outdoor rock climbing mixes so many things, right? Community, adventure, like as you get better, you can take some of the most epic trips in the world. So it's adventure. It's great for fitness. It also promotes me or encourages me to be lighter, which is something I've been trying to do for a long time. Just become a smaller person, because a smaller person can probably climb better. So I've been, and the way that I found that was thinking about what things combine, like what activities combine, like fitness activities combine as many of my passions or interests as possible.
Great. And then what about the co-housing community, right? So if we think about that, and that's a pretty complex project. What opportunities do you see within pursuit of building your co-housing community are there for you to be able to deepen your sense of awareness and presence, to be able to deepen your sense of love and relationship, and to be able to expand your growth and your learning, right? It's kind of an implicit question. I don't need you to answer it, because I can already even just see in your faces we're talking about this, the wheels are spinning, right? But the real important thing is be aware of the opportunities within what we're doing to be able to enrich it, because that's what it's all about. When we see those types of things, then we can hedge our risk on the outcome of it, and we can actually really experience peace and the sense of wealth while we're pursuing something really big, right? And it's not just about crossing that finish line, pardon the pun in the example that I gave, but it's about enjoying that process. And this lens of eclectic wealth is something that has really a big impact in the leadership teams that we've been able to work with. And I think the real space to be able to do this is this practice of strategic solitude, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's badass, man. And as you posed that last question, my mind just started spinning, and I just realized this slight little perspective shift in how I was approaching the co-housing community thing. That if I take that approach, then it will enhance my ability. It will allow me to compound interest in presence and awareness, as well as growth and learning, which is huge. I mean, the love and relationships, I think, is going to be inevitable, but the other two, if I take this really simple shift. So thank you for that, dude.
No problem. And I think what you'll find interesting is, as you build this community, I think what you're probably going to find, Mike, is that the people who are participating in this community likely have a similar triple bottom line to you. They likely have currencies that matter, that are very similar, right? And that's where the experience out there is something that can go and grow. Our box up here in Kitchener-Waterloo, Limitless Performance, they're a terrific example of this, right? We're there not only to be able to have really good health set and train ourselves and to do our workout of the day and to challenge ourselves, but the community's there. And everybody is there. There's nobody a part of that community who does not think that community matters to them and relationships. In fact, they're there because that is a community that is intentional about both,
right,
and learning as well, right? And so I think when we're really clear around what currencies matter most to us, we start to see how we're similar and why we're connected to others. And with that explicit awareness, we can then call more attention to that for others and help them really understand the unique ingredients that are coming together, whether that's your gym, whether that's co-housing community, or just a family that you're trying to build too.
So just reiterate those questions for people one more time.
Yeah. So at the very top, find some space for you to experience some strategic solitude. So solitude, Cal Newport, defines this really well, in my opinion. It's not being alone or away from others. It's really putting yourself in a position where you are void of the input from others. It's just yourself. So you can experience solitude in the middle of a Starbucks cafe if you're not talking to anybody and you're not on your phone and you're not listening to an audiobook, right? If you're just totally present there. But find that space for strategic solitude. So that's the first question, is when are you going to go and do that? And not just now, but for the next 2 years. Book those every 90 days and create an awesome day around that. Like when I went and did my last strategic solitude, Mike, I went to a dude ranch in the middle of Colorado, went to backcountry skiing all by myself, had amazing food. Like, this isn't to be alone and not enjoying it. Make something that pulls you to want to go and have that space. Then the questions. You're an eclectic millionaire. What are the currencies that matter to you beyond finances? Don't think about 7 of them. Think about 3. What are 3 that really matter to you? Okay, if you're taking strategic solitude, what investments have you been making over the last 90 days? And how wealthy are you in each of those currencies right now? Right? We talked about that framework that your listeners can circle back to if they'd like, right? But are you experiencing poverty? Do you have a good savings rate? Or do you just spot where you have intergenerational wealth in that particular area? And then how are those investments serving you? Where are you getting really good returns that you want to carry forward with the next 90 days? Which ones are no longer serving you that you might want to drop out of your investment portfolio? Then being really clear for the next 90 days, what are the top investments that matter to me, right? And just getting really clear on that. And then secondary to that is, how can I enrich that investment with the multiplier effect? How can I be really intentional about getting returns from the time and energy I'm putting into those investments to make sure that I'm building wealth on all 3 or 4 areas of my bottom line, not just that financial wealth. And really sitting back and asking yourself, how wealthy am I really? And I think, in hearing you share where you are, Mike, regardless of what your bank statement says, I would say you're a living demonstration of what it looks like to be an eclectic millionaire, right? And somebody who is committing to the process of continuing to build that over a lifetime. Quarter by quarter, 90 days by 90 days, we see with this COVID stuff outside of our control is going to impact our portfolio and where we're at. But it's the process and the commitment to honoring yourself and listening to that intuition and asking damn good questions and holding space in strategic solitude that'll make sure that the long game is being played and you're continuing to be building value in what you're doing. So those are some of the questions there, and I hope they serve you, and I hope they serve your listeners too.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. And if you're gonna take this on, listener, I encourage you, like when you find yourself in solitude, you're answering the questions. Jordan Peterson puts it as the best way to do this type of work is to sit in a state of reverie. Don't think about this like a homework assignment where you ask the question and you get immediately to writing and you try to get it over with as quickly as possible. Try to sit with it, like sit up straight, open your chest, make sure your breathing is nice and deep, and just see what comes up. Some things might come up immediately, but oftentimes it just takes a few moments. It might take 20 minutes for the real shit to come up. And so just don't be in a hurry to get through this stuff.
Great point, Mike. And I would say, I'm all for finding a nice quiet spot to sit. I also would love to advocate for moving the body. Get out in nature, move your body, ask the question, and then see what comes up, like you said, right? And I think, lastly, for those who have the courage to lean into this, Mike, is share your narrative with others after that. I tell you, some of the most impactful conversations I've ever had with my wife, Jen, is sitting down and saying, here are the big investments I'm making over the next 90 days. You're number 3 on the priority list just for these next 90 days. I need to borrow from you. I need to make an agreement with you that I need to double down on my Ironman training because, hey, we're getting close to the race. So that means that helping with the kids and stuff around home is going to be my investment number 3 or number 5, right? And just building that clarity, that level of support that's within there is so important. And using that group as well to be able to make sure that you're staying clear and honest with yourself as you're going through it. But I think when we have the awareness that comes from strategic solitude, it puts us in a damn good position to really deepen our relationship and how we support others in moving forward. And I think that's the challenge I would leave to others after taking strategic solitude is share it with your team. More importantly, share it with your spouse. And again, the nice thing about that is you're borrowing, you're not stealing, right? You're not asking for permission, you're enrolling them in your journey and put yourself in the same position to ask what their investments are and how you can support them and moving those forward too. We're all on our own unique path in that regard.
So what investment, as of the time of this recording, it's April 15th. We're in the heart of the COVID-19 stuff. What investment are you or investments are you making in this quarter that you intend to have compounding interest in some area, some meaningful area for you?
So a big investment that I've been spending time on right now is our home. We have 2 kids at home. We have another one on the way come August, and we've decided to embark on a really big home renovation. And rather than doubling down on work right now, I've really tried to keep that where it's still an investment I'm making, but really focusing on building a beautiful home, not a house, but a home here with our family. And so, there's a part of me right at the beginning, we were thinking about this. There's the obvious returns when you talk about investments, right? Spending money on a home. Well, we're starting to build equity in our home. It's a great time now to start doing that in our market, at least. And so that's certainly an investment financially, but where I'm really trying to be intentional, Mike, about going beyond the financial reasons is saying, okay, how might I go about building out this home renovation in a way where I can experience adventure and awe? And one of the best ways to do that has been engaging my kids in this process, going out back with Caleb and asking him to show me how he would design the backyard and in a spot where it's not all about my ideas, but looking for little moments where I can say, Caleb, how would you design this? Or, hey, here's some examples of some drawings from our designer. This is a 10-year-old, by the way. And actually just taking the moment, the extra little 5 minutes to say, Caleb, why don't you grab a red pen and come sit down with me here and let's model out. I want you to sketch out how you would change this based on the things that you think would be really, really, really fun, right? And then other things too, like connection and community. For me, my dad is a real handyman. I haven't spent a lot of time with him. And so I could, spend a bunch of money and go and engage general contractors for all their advice and get their support, of which we're doing in certain aspects. But I could also use this as an opportunity to be able to say, hey, Dad, do you mind if we chat every week, even if it's just for an hour? I just love to keep in touch and run some of my questions by you. And what I'm learning through that is, yes, we start the conversation about the construction, but it goes way deeper than that. It goes to an opportunity where we can really connect father and son around that. And when I think about our health set and doing this too, it's funny, it's all seems so insignificant, Mike, but as we're working around the house and cleaning up our backyard right now, we could just be trying to work as fast as possible to get this thing clean so we can start our renovations. But what we've been doing? We've been taking these big logs that we have and we've been doing overhead squats with the kids and we've been doing different obstacle courses in the backyard, goofing around to be able to stimulate our health set. And so it's all just with these small, small little seemingly insignificant changes where we're able to take a really obvious investment in the equity in our home. And now we're getting such rich returns in pursuit of going to do that. And that's one that is so important right now because I think it's going to set myself up and our family up where not only do we have a beautiful home to be able to pass on to our kids and to be able to share with our community, but we're doing it in such a way where I feel like we're truly building intergenerational wealth when it comes to helping the kids find micro moments throughout this experience to be able to experience adventure, to be able to have a sense of connection, and along the way continuing to do something that we're really excited about and a dream that is near and dear to our heart. So that's an investment that's top of mind over here for me. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. I feel like right now, maybe more than ever in our lifetime, our generation, it is so important to take time in solitude to really check in with what matters to you in your life. I don't know if everyone is in a position to do so. A lot of people are on the front lines and they're being stretched like they've never been before, and they might not have the space to really check in like this. But I know, the majority of people that I know personally are in a space where they have a little bit more time on their hands, even if they're, working from home for the first time. They have more time on their hands. And they don't have nearly as many distractions in their life. And so what I keep hearing is people saying things like, I don't feel any FOMO right now because no one's doing anything. I have a simpler life and I really enjoy it. I'm spending more time around the house or in the yard. I'm really enjoying that. I think it's so important right now while we have this all of these circumstances going on, and we have this, some of us have this break from regular life to check in with what matters to you, right? If you're having insights, if you're having aha moments, really check in with, or really like capture those things so you will remember them. And if possible, create a system, create habits, rituals that allow you to maintain those insights and make this time that's full of chaos and uncertainty and so much loss, and turn it into an opportunity for yourself and for your family.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny. I know we're just wrapping up here, but in the spirit of that, one of the investments that we made in taking that space, it was funny. You know, when this originally happened mid-March, Mike, we were sitting down with our kids, and they were frustrated because they couldn't see their friends, and you know, all the other kind of collateral damage for some of these changes. And just by asking that question, like regardless of where you're at, I think everybody needs to and deserves that space. We'll say, what's the opportunity here? And just having that question for yourself, given the circumstances that are there, and when you can say, wow, you know, we really are so rich, and you know, we might be in a spot where we can't go and do the normal day to day, but what we might be able to go and do, just affording for that question allowed us to think of a really cool investment that we could do just over the course of 2 weeks with the kids, where we ended up taking a motorhome to Eastern Canada. And rather than doing social distancing at home, we did it inside of a motorhome where gas was, you know, 50% of the regular rate, and as with the rental fees. So I think when we have this type of space and we look at our life through this lens with these different currencies, it allows us into what seems like a moment of crisis, really realize how rich we truly are, and be in a spot where rather than being dimmed and have our light turned down, we can really ask those questions around what the opportunity is, and then pursue them with a huge open heart, and also permission just to go and have fun and to have us a part of what we're up to.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. Okay, so you have a ton of different stuff going on. If you look on your different websites, explain Strategic Solitude for the people that don't already understand what it is that you're working on, this newest project.
Yeah, so Strategic Solitude, really, one of the things that I've learned, Mike, is doing this practice on my own is tough. You know, you alluded to this a moment ago. There's a lot of people who would maybe say they don't have the time to go and do that, or the structure to go and do that. And admittedly, Mike, if I think back to my first experience in Hawaii, this work's painful as hell up front. If you haven't done this work before, having to sit with the realization that I was experiencing poverty in my relationships in my life and my health set, while at the very same time, many would have described me as being very successful. That's tough work. And doing that on my own is something that was hard, but I've also come to realize is a reason why a lot of people don't do it. And very similarly in our businesses, like whenever I do strategic planning, I can do that for my team, but I've found to have massive impact and difference when I engage a third party to come in and hold space so that I can fully participate in the experience rather than have to structure and facilitate it myself. And when we're talking about strategic solitude for the individuals, it's really hard to be able to go and do it. So strategic solitude are live experiences that we've been building that really allow leaders to be able to proactively cultivate the clarity, the alignment in their portfolio, and ultimately the capacity to be able to continue to work at threshold. And so in these experiences that we do, we bring small groups of leaders away to amazing resorts or great areas where they can experience adventure and awe and be in an environment that's really conducive to doing this work, where we can take care of all the food, all the accommodations, all the sport and the exercise and the community elements of things, and also provide some structure so that participants in these strategic solitude experiences can learn this practice. And that's really what it is. You know, it's a practice and a process that we guide them through with the hope that they build a recurring practice themselves ongoing. And within that same experience, Mike, we really take full advantage of having 2 days with people to really make sure that is a deep cycle of recovery. And so when we bring these leaders away, we're not only just holding space for them to go and lean into these types of tough questions and to be able to do that in the area where they have community support. we're also doing it such that we're being very thoughtful in architecting an experience that is nurturing the body, nurturing the mind, allowing people to have terrific sleep, and really use that as a reprieve that also gives them the clarity to be able to continue to move forward at the speed that they're used to, and at the level of intensity that they're used to thereafter. So it's a great way to be able to learn and start to build the muscles around this strategic solitude experience. Many of the folks that we've been working with commit to doing it every 90 days with us because, like I said, it's I don't know about you, I'm not strong enough to do this on my own. I love having some guidance around it, and like having a coach, it allows the athlete to be able to focus on the sport, not the actual structure of it, right?
Right.
That's why coaching is so powerful, and you can see it from a different perspective within that. So we create these experiences to be able to guide people through that, and it's been a ton of fun, and starting to realize that the principles that we've been talking about, it's been really neat to see leaders walk away from these experiences, not only with an understanding of the currencies that matter to them personally, but also seeing the impact of this going back into the workplace. And, we mentioned the B Corporation earlier on, giving them permission and also just kind of seeing what they've been doing thereafter of how they've taken this idea of eclectic wealth and a triple bottom line into their companies too, which is really cool to see that ripple effect. But that's a bit about the strategic solitude experience that we're up to.
Badass, man. Where can people find out more about those?
Yeah, so best place to check it out is thresholdleadership.co. You'll see all of our experiences up there. And if you're really interested in kind of seeing some of the formative stuff that was early days around this, you can go and check out polarretreat.com. One of the ways that we really wanted to validate this experience for others, we actually built a spa in our backyard here and a space to be able to facilitate this locally. So we ended up calling that Polar Retreat. It's a heck of an experience that we did. That was early days. But it really planted the seeds for what now has really blossomed into a full-on practice.
It's so good, man. And your website for the Polar Retreat is awesome. And guys, Dave is going to hook you up with something really cool. So whether you're a leader or not, if you're someone that wants to take some solitude and do some deep introspective work yourself, he is offering a number of his best questions. He's going to put them together in a PDF for you, and we will link to those in the show notes. And those are some things that can facilitate some really big insights for you in your life. Dave, this was phenomenal, dude. I have so much respect for you. The reason I texted you yesterday, I was going to talk to you about your age and how wise you are. But since we've run out of time, I just want to acknowledge you for just doing the work. It's easy to read a bunch of books and regurgitate things that other people have said, but I can just tell by the way that you carry yourself in the world that you have done and are continuing to do the work of understanding yourself better and communicating with people better and being the best leader that you can. So thank you for what you do in the world, man. And thanks for doing the show with me.
It's my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for inviting me. And I think, it's all our responsibility to be beacons of love, in my opinion. And you're too a really great example of that. And I think building the eclectic wealth that we were talking about today really puts us in a position to be able to share that with others. And that's really my motivation at the end of the day. So glad that we could connect here. Thanks so much. Looking forward to doing this again.
Awesome, man. Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Your journey towards better fitness continues. Head over to brutestrengthtraining.com to connect with Michael and his guests. Access links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. That's brutestrengthtraining.com.